Hi everyone, let me adjust my camera here real quick. And hello everyone, welcome in to, there we go. That's a little too high. If I can adjust that. There we go. That's probably as good as what it's going to be. And then hi everyone, welcome in to a very special episode, of course, of Matt Sports Talk. And I know that it's the month of April and spring is in full swing and everything. And I wanted to record a very special episode. Of course, I mentioned that last month that it was going to be that I wasn't going to be releasing any more episodes until September, which that is the case. But I wanted to record a very special episode, kind of, leading us into the summer break and then, and not just that, but kind of leading us into season 3, which officially will launch in September, which I'm super excited about that. I have some big things planned. I cannot wait to share all of that with you once we hit the month of September. And again, so please be on the lookout for those episodes that I have planned for September. I'm still going to do the season previews, at least my predictions of Crossroads League men's and women's basketball projections in early October. Still plan on doing that. Still going to do the daily game recaps for Crossroads League men's and women's basketball when conference play starts in November. Still going to do all those things. Still going to do all things national tournament for men's or at least for women's basketball. Still going to do all things national tournament for Crossroads League women's basketball. Same thing that I did this year as well as last year. Super excited about that. And again, make sure that you stay tuned for that. Now, so of course, I'm going to talk a little bit later on, kind of doing, kind of talking about, why I recorded this special episode, because it is a milestone episode in terms of the subscribers that I now have here on my channel, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But going off of that, I did want to record an episode, not just, kind of an episode of thanks, so to speak, which again, obviously that's very important, recording a special episode of thanks and appreciation to all of you that watch my videos and are subscribed to my channel, and I'll talk more about that here just a little bit later. But going off of that, I wanted to record some content before I officially share my thanks and my gratitude for all of you that watch this channel regularly and that are subscribed. And we are going to talk briefly about NAIA women's softball. And again, it's something that I typically don't talk about. However, we are in the heat of the regular season. Things are finishing up here over the next couple of weeks, and I believe there's only 6 or 7 games, I want to say, left after today for a lot of the teams in the Crossroads League, which is what I will be talking about in this very special episode. So, and again, I'm not going to talk about the playoff scenarios or potential national tournament projections and whatnot. I'm not going to dive into that. However, if you are following along at home with your favorite softball team, particularly in the Crossroads League, like what I am, or should I say what I'm doing as well, maybe you're doing the same thing, I did want to talk about the selection or the formula for the NAIA selection committee that selects these teams to be in the national tournament, and I wanted to talk about that selection formula or the selection criteria with you, so that maybe you're looking at the Crossroads League standings and you're looking at your favorite team, especially a team that has a really good record, maybe a team that has kind of a little above 500 record that could be that has a very good chance of being on the bubble, teams that in the Crossroads League that are looking really good right now, but depending on how the league tournament goes, obviously then you're going to be looking at other conferences in terms of, are there going to be teams that steal bids, which is very doable. Once again, this year, we had that happen last year. I'm sure we're going to have the same thing happen this year, and you might be wondering, okay, well, is there a chance that my team may still get in, even if there are teams in other conferences that steal bids? Well, I am here to answer that question for you. So without further ado, we are going to dive in. Now, NAIA women's softball works a little bit differently than men's and women's basketball. Of course, men's and women's basketball, you have at least in terms of the main pieces of criteria, you have your RPI, you have your ARC ranking, you also have your quad records for men's and women's basketball. Softball works a little bit different. Now, in softball, you still have your RPI, you still have your ARC ranking, but the rest of it is way different, and we are going to dive into that here momentarily. So obviously, if you are, keeping up or following along, I should say, with your favorite team, you might be wondering, okay, well, does my team right now, based on the Crossroads League standings, have a chance of being in? Do they have a really good chance? Are they going to be a team that is going to be on the bubble? Maybe, depending on the rest of the country, to go chalk, meaning that teams that should win their conference tournaments on paper ends up winning. And well, that's what I'm here to share with you. So this is just the main pieces, the main pieces of criteria that go into the selection. And obviously, you have your win percentage. And again, win percentage is very, very important in the aspect of, obviously, the higher the winning percentage. Obviously, that's a goal that every team should have, to have a chance at either being in the national tournament with an automatic bid. And again, softball, it's different because in men's and women's basketball, you have 64 teams make the national tournament. In softball, you only have 48. So obviously that number is cut in half between men's and women's basketball to softball. So meaning that, there's roughly 16 at-large bids available across the whole entire country. So again, the odds of your team getting in the national tournament or not, that obviously is is something that could very well happen, even if your team has a really, really good year. And a perfect example of that is Mount Vernon Nazarene 3 years ago. I believe they were 38-15, I want to say, after the league tournament was over, and they did not make the national tournament because they didn't beat anybody in terms of the teams ahead of them in the league standings. So obviously, and they are a perfect example of teams that, are, let's say, 35-15, 37-13, and not make the national tournament. I've seen that happen. So again, obviously what you're trying to get to here is have a really good winning percentage. Obviously, the higher the percentage, the better. And then you have your ARC ranking, and the ARC ranking, it works just like in men's and women's basketball, but if you're brand new to sports in general, or you don't understand what the ARC ranking means, well, I'm here to help explain that to you, so you better understand it, just like I did prior to this season, or this past season, I should say, of men's and women's basketball. So your ARC ranking, it's the NAIA grouping together, other conferences, basically putting teams up against other teams across the country. And again, I know that may sound confusing. I hope that's not the case, but that's what your ARC ranking is. And when you look at the standings, of course, you'll go to the NAIA website, and then you'll click on softball, and then I believe the tab that you will need is going to be softball, and then for you to look at the ARC numbers, you'll go to the NAIA website and click on sports, click on softball, and then you'll click on your regular season resources, and then you will click on the ARC rankings as well as the RPI rankings. And the RPI is going to be at the top of the page, and the ARC ranking is going to be at the bottom. Women's softball does not do quad records, which, again, that's another different thing. That's another thing that is different compared to basketball. So that's how the softballs, that's how it works for the ARC, RPI, as well as your strength of schedule. Again, strength of schedule is the same thing in softball as it is for men's and women's basketball. So you look at your ARC, and that is your Area Ratings Committee. That's what it stands for. And in the West region, you'll have your again, some of these conferences, our name is a little bit different, but in the South Arc, you'll have the Red River, the Sooner, the Continental, and the HBCU. In the Midwest, you'll have the AMC, Hart, KCAC, and the GPAC, the Great Plains Athletic Conference. Then in the East region, you'll have your Southern States, the Sun, the Appalachian, and the Mid-South. And then in the North region, you'll have your CCAC, the Chicagoland Collegiate Athletic Conference. You'll have the Crossroads League, the River States, and the WAC, the Wolverine Hoosier Athletic Conference. And then in the West region, you'll have your Great Southwest Conference, as well as the Cascade and the Frontier. So that is where all of those ARC regions are. So again, when you're looking at that, your team, you'll obviously click on the ARC, and then you'll find your team listed in that region. And again, the higher up you are in your respective ARC, the better chance you'll have of being in the national tournament. Now, obviously, when you're looking at your ARC rating, you'll see that it looks like a conference standing or standings, and obviously the way that it looks like, it's basically it's almost like a super conference, so to speak, when you're looking when you're looking at that. And obviously the higher up you are in your ARC, the higher the chance, more than likely, of you being picked to be in the national tournament. Now, when you look at when you're looking at that, again, you should be playing teams in your ARC and not just in your conference, but also in the non-conference schedule as well. So that is something very, very important. So that is what the ARC rating is. And again, when you play teams in your ARC or your region, it again, whether you win those games or not, it helps your ARC standing, because then you're one of the better teams in that region to be potentially picked to be able to go to the national tournament. So that is what the ARC rating is. Then you get to your Massey rating, and again, the Massey rating, they used to use it a lot, not this past season of men's and women's basketball, but the following year, the Massey rating was a factor in that. I guess for basketball, they took that away. For softball, that is a major piece of the criteria. So obviously, when you go to the Massey rating, and again, you'll search NAIA softball Massey rating, and then when you click on that, you'll see the team in the number one position in the Massey rating. And the last time I looked the other day, it was Madonna out of Michigan that's having another stellar season. And again, the higher up you are in the Massey rating, again, that's where you want to be. So again, I would say in the Massey rating, if you're trying to find your favorite team, and maybe you're saying, well, do we have a chance of making the national tournament? What do we need to do to improve our Massey rating to get up a lot higher in order to make the national tournament? That's obviously what you will be looking at. And again, the higher up you are in the Massey rating is obviously what you're trying to get to. And then so that's the Massey rating. And then you'll have, again, your next big piece criteria is the RPI. And again, the RPI, it works the same way as it does in basketball. Again, your RPI, it's not a reflection of how your season is going or how it has gone. It does reflect the amount of games that you played, as well as the number of games you have left to play in your respective season. So, for example, you might have a really high RPI at the start of the year because you played a really, really tough, non-conference schedule, which if you did that, that's going to help your strength of schedule number, and that, of course, is the last big piece of primary criteria that you would want to see your team, get to. If you have a really good, high strength of schedule number, let's say in the top 30, let's say, that basically means that you played one of the toughest schedules in the whole country. And again, some teams, you might be in that top 10 in terms of a strength of schedule, meaning that you played one of the all-time toughest schedules compared to the rest of the country. And again, the higher the strength of schedule number, the better chance you'll have of your team being in a national tournament, and whatnot. So that is what that's what the strength of schedule number is. Now again, your RPI number, and again, your RPI number might dip toward the end of the year because you're not playing a lot of of strong teams. Or maybe your RPI might go up toward the end of the year, depending on, how your conference, schedule is, depending on if you're playing, better teams in your conference or teams lower down in your conference. That's what the RPI stands for. And then, of course, So that is the main piece of criteria that the NAIA looks for in picking teams to be in a national tournament. So then to our secondary criteria, you have your conference record. Obviously, how good have you been in your conference? Obviously, the higher the amount of wins in your conference, that's obviously what you're trying to get to in terms of your favorite team. If you're following along, that's what you're going to be rooting for your favorite team to do, is to have a really high conference record. And obviously if you're in middle of the pack in your conference, obviously you're kind of going to be dependent on a team making a deep run in the league tournament, making it to the league title game to where you get an automatic bid into the national tournament. And again, a lot of the conferences in softball work the same way as basketball, to where if you have 10 or more schools, you get 2 automatic bids. If you have less than 10, you only get 1 bid. Now, with the North Star Conference not being there in softball in the Frontier, they only get 1 automatic bid compared to men's and women's basketball, to where they get 2 bids because they have 10 or more schools on the basketball side, but on the softball side, they only have 9 because of doing away with the North Star after last year. So then your next secondary criteria is your head-to-head record. Basically, what was your head-to-head record against the teams in your conference? And again, obviously what you're trying to get to is, the way softball is, you play a double header, and obviously, and that's 4 games, because you play 2 games. And again, you play every team in your conference twice. You play 2 games the first go around at home, and then 2 games the second time in the season on the road. So obviously, you want to have, you want to be 4-0 in your doubleheader games in terms of your head-to-head. Then you have your common opponents. Basically, in your conference, you look at top to bottom standings of what did everybody do in the conference, top to bottom, against each other. That's what common opponents are. We see that in men's and women's basketball with common opponent tiebreakers every single year. Basically, if there's a tie between 2 teams, what did those 2 teams do against the top teams in the standings in that conference? So that's what that means. And then obviously your conference / your non-conference record. And again, that's going to change depending on, how tough, or, maybe not quite as tough as teams that scheduled conference or non-conference games. And then obviously your other pieces of criteria that are considered but not, a huge part of the selection, of course, is the team's overall schedule. Basically who did every team play over the course of the year. Obviously, then you'll have your home, away, and neutral record. Again, that it works the same way in basketball, except the team schedule part of it, and then the score of each individual game. That's obviously considered not the case in basketball. Then your opponent and your opponent's record. Basically, your opponent. Who did you play? Did you play a team toward the top of your standings? Did you play a team, lower down in your standings? That's what that means. And then your opponent's record, basically who you are playing in your games. How is their season going? Have they won more games? Have they won less games? Obviously that is a huge piece of the criteria there. And then, so that is a breakdown of how to follow along with your favorite team in terms of a selection process for NAIA women's softball. Now, one thing of note is that in softball, they don't use opponents' winning percentage, which I know they do in men's and women's basketball, which again, that can be an important part of the selection. They do not go off of any opponent's winning percentage or opponent's winning percentage. Now, your opponent's winning percentage, they did that for basketball, not this past season, but last year they did away with that this past season because I think it got too confusing for a lot of people. So then, in terms of your opponent's winning percentage, for example, in softball, and again, my next update's coming out Monday, but I'm not going to, talk about that every single week. I just wanted to talk with you about this, as part of this very special episode today. And then, for example, Indiana Wesleyan in the first RPI, they were 31st. Their RPI rating was 571, and again, the closer to 1.00 or 100% in your RPI is what you are trying to get to if you're following along with your favorite team. Their strength of schedule was 90th. Again, you want to see that strength of schedule a lot higher, meaning that Indiana Wesleyan did not play a really tough non-conference schedule compared to the rest of the country. And then their strength of schedule percentage there was 517. They were 22-8 as of the last RPI release, and their opponents, their winning percentage was 73%. And obviously, the higher the winning percentage number, that is a huge piece of the selection formula. And their opponent's winning percentage was 513. But again, your opponent's winning percentage, that is not factored into the criteria. Their opponent's was 523. Again, opponent's it's way too deep, and I'm glad that the NAIA got rid of that all the way around. But their opponent's winning percentage was 513, meaning that, you know, who did their opponents play this year? Meaning that with that opponent's winning percentage number, that the teams that they played this year have won a good amount of games in terms of a pretty average number of just over, 50%. So that is, but again, that's not part of a selection formula, or it's not part of the huge, it's not a big piece of the criteria as it is. In fact, they're not doing any of that for softball compared to basketball. So that's a breakdown of that. I did want to take a minute as I end this video to say a sincere thanks and appreciation for all of you that have subscribed to my channel from the very beginning when I started doing these videos in January of 2025. It truly means a lot to me to be able to do this, and I have hit the milestone of 200 subscribers and counting, which I really, really appreciate. And for those of you that have helped me reach that goal that I had and that milestone, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And it truly means a lot to me to have you as a subscriber on my channel and for you to watch all of my videos. And I hope that the content has been super helpful to you as well. And I cannot wait to officially launch season 3 in the month of September. And I have some very, very exciting things planned that I'm not able to talk about right now, but I cannot wait to share all of that with you in the month of September. And it is going to be an amazing season 3 of Matt Sports Talk coming up in September. And of course, basketball season is going to be right around the corner before we know it. That'll be coming up in the month of November in terms of conference play. So can't wait to dive into that, recap all of that. And I just want to say again that thank you so much for allowing me to be not just for allowing me to be part of this channel and to be sharing all this content with you, but for you taking the time, and I'm sure you are very, very busy during the day or night whenever you watch these videos, but I truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart you taking the time to watch these videos and to subscribe to my channel. And again, please continue to do so, as this will be the absolute last episode before the month of September, when I cannot wait to officially start season 3 at that time. And so as this video will take us into the rest of the spring and summer break, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and please do keep doing so over the spring and summer. And of course, my goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of next March, after the national tournament is completed for women's basketball late next March. So please keep subscribing to my channel throughout the spring and summer, and please let's hit that goal by the end of next March. And again, I cannot wait to share some brand new and very exciting content with you in the month of September. And again, I'm super excited about that and can't wait to dive into that coming up at that time. So again, thank you so much for watching this video, and for being part of this channel with me as well. So if you did enjoy this video or find it very helpful and or informative, please either like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly, and I truly appreciate any feedback that you may provide me. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great spring. Have a great summer. And I cannot wait to be back with you in September for season 3 of Matt Sports Talk. God bless.